I get the surprise of a lifetime with my sibling when she shows up to my father's funeral. We haven't ever talked before. She is my older sister, and I was completely shocked when she told us this.
I, 25 female, lost my father a few months ago, and things have been very difficult for our family ever since. But I'm afraid that things seem to be getting even worse. My father died of cancer 4 months ago after a really long and difficult battle. He was diagnosed a few years ago, and we were hopeful at the time that the chemo could help. But it turned out to be useless. Cancer had already spread too far, and honestly, we were lucky to get the time we did with him because the doctors thought that he would die within months. And, well, we got 2 years. It's been a really bad couple of years, obviously, and since my dad died, things have been worse. As is expected, Dad did not bother writing a will or anything, even though we all tried to convince him to do that. So there's been a lot of issues with his estate. He wasn't rich or anything, but he was a big saver. So there was a lot of money tucked away that even my mother did not know about. After a lot of lawyer visits and appeals, we finally managed to stop the government from taking a hold of his assets, and were able to divide the money equally between my siblings and me. There are 3 of us, and after paying funeral costs and stuff, there was enough to leave us all a good chunk of money. I want to briefly interrupt myself here and say, obviously we aren't glad for the money, or anything. We would much rather have our father back, but for the background necessary here, the money is the pain theme that I need to tell you about. Well, Dad's marriage to my mom was his second marriage. He had a wife and a child previously that he rarely saw. I don't know exactly what the details are because Mom and Dad always changed the subject when asked about it, but I'm pretty sure that Dad left his first wife for Mom, who had been his student in college that he was lecturing. It was all a very big deal at the time. Quite the scandal between all the families, to be honest, but it's been about 30 years since it's happened, so it doesn't feel quite as big of a deal to us. As far as I know, when Dad left his first wife, the divorce was really messy. There was a custody battle and all kinds of nastiness. But the court ended up granting my father's ex-wife full custody, and my dad fought for visitation, but he was blocked by her lawyers at every turn. So he had not really seen his first daughter in 30 years. I know it bothered him a lot, but by the time I was old enough to really understand the situation, he was kind of resigned to the fact. We always knew that we had a sister out there somewhere. It's not like she's been some kind of dirty secret that my parents kept from us. It was always common knowledge. Dad would have us sign Christmas and birthday cards every year, and he would give us updates on how she was doing, even though we really didn't care. She just was always a distant presence in our life. But none of us had actually met her until the day of the funeral. Dad was a social guy, so there was a lot of people at the funeral who I didn't recognize, and friends from work and from college, and that kind of thing, so it wasn't weird for us to see someone we didn't recognize. But at the very end of the burial, she approached us and introduced herself. I'll admit that all of us were kind of in shock at the time. Dad's death was a long time coming, but I think that all of us secretly hoped and expected that he would make a miraculous recovery. So I don't think we were able to give her the grand welcome that she expected. It was a little strange meeting her. She's 35. So there's a 10-year age difference between her and me, and I'm the oldest sibling, so it's weird to suddenly be the little sister. I think she expected us to welcome her into the family with open arms, and invite her to share in our grief, but we were selfish. I can't speak for my siblings, but at least for me, I was a little bitter that she had not shown up before when Dad was still alive. Even though Dad was always resigned to the fact that he was not a part of his daughter's life by the time I was old enough to really grasp the understanding of the situation. There was no question that it was the biggest regret of his life. Growing up, we all knew not to bring her up unless he did first, because it would send him into one of his moods and he'd spend the next few days crying. I think that I felt insulted on his behalf that she had not shown up earlier. I think that it would have granted him a little more peace before he went. I know that this is me being unreasonable, but I do. She has her own life and her own history with her dad. I grew up with him. She hasn't seen him since she was 5 years old. Of course she's going to have a complex relationship with his death. I don't even know if she knew he was sick before he died. She isn't very open about what she does and doesn't know, and I get the impression their mom has a very strict policy about not mentioning my father around her. Who's to say she had not thought about him in years, and only found out about his death the very same morning of his funeral? I was a little cold to her when she first showed up, and I do think that's why she acted the way she is now. My younger siblings were very open to her, and I think it gave them some comfort to have someone else to mourn Dad's loss with. It was just me who seemed to have a problem with her. When someone dies, there's a lot of family time all of a sudden, and people like to sit and look through pictures, tell stories about the dead, reminisce, and all of a sudden, there was a stranger with us every time one of these situations arose. My siblings would invite her to family functions and she would accept it every time. I think her mom's lasting hatred for my dad was pretty isolating, so it was nice for her to have people around her who did not cringe every time he was brought up. The problems arose once everything was sorted out with the lawyers about his money. No one thought to tell her about what was going on, not in a malicious way or anything like that. We just did not think she'd be interested. But once the money was divided up between us, my little sister mentioned it to her, and that's when things started getting a little tense. As soon as she heard about the money and it was divided by 3, she got a little quiet. No one paid her much attention. She's always been shy with us, and only recently had she started to open up a bit, but she was still prone to long silences. So the conversation was just going on around her, and she suddenly asked how much money she was getting. I can honestly say that, well, the thought hadn't crossed my mind. From the looks of my siblings' face, they haven't thought of it either. Though we knew technically that she was Dad's daughter. None of us had really digested the information enough to think that she was entitled to some of his money. Things got a little awkward then, and no one really wanted to be the first one to talk, but she pushed the issue. I'd never seen her so assertive before. It almost seemed like she had been working her way up to saying this ever since she first came to the funeral. We all did a little more throat clearing and shuffling of our feet, but she was getting exasperated. I could tell from the way she was shifting in her seat, so she asked again, straight out, how much of Dad's money she was getting. I don't know how, but things ended up getting a little aggressive between her and me. I genuinely don't know how things got to that point, but eventually it was like me and she was just going toe-to-toe in a ring or something. She was yelling, calling us selfish and thoughtless, insulting our mom. I was yelling, telling her she was a deadbeat daughter for showing up as soon as she was there with some money for the horizon. My little siblings were just sitting there looking upset, and it felt like I had to protect them. Eventually she left, and I was left annoyed in my little sister's apartment. I did feel a sense of satisfaction, though. Any older sibling would know the smug feeling you get when it feels like you've done your duty and successfully defended your honor of the siblings from a bully. So I was feeling really happy with myself at that point, but it didn't last long. All of a sudden, it was me in the hot seat, and my little sister was yelling at me for, well, driving our big sister away. I had no idea where this was coming from, but when I tried to defend myself, she just interrupted me. According to her, I've been snobby and rude to our sister ever since she first arrived. Apparently, I've been cold and deliberately tried to cut her out of the family. My little brother just sat there while I was getting reamed. I don't think he agreed with what was being said, but he's never been one to get into the middle of a conflict. Eventually, I just left. I wasn't going to sit around and get yelled at, especially when I've done nothing wrong. But it got me thinking. I genuinely did not think that my dad's first daughter is entitled to any of his money. She wasn't there when he was sick. She wasn't the one cleaning up vomit when he was sick from the chemo. She wasn't there when he cried about the fact that he'd never see us grow up. She hasn't been there for any of the difficult moments, but as soon as there's just a hint, a smell, a little scent of the money, she comes crashing in like a shark smelling blood in the water from miles away. It's disgusting and predatory. I also don't think I've been rude to her the slightest. On the contrary, I tried my hardest to make her feel welcome. Even though it felt awkward, I'd never been good at meeting new people. I get shy and quiet, but I genuinely made an effort to make her feel welcome in the family. I recognized that I had these preconceived prejudices against her, and I tried to understand her situation to the best of my ability. And well, my reward for that is her trying to snake in and take some of Dad's money and my little sister calling me selfish. It isn't fair. I'll admit that I still had some reservations about her before she asked about the money. Every time she interacted with my mom, it felt like I could see her glaring. I was nervous that her mom's anger at her dad for leaving her had been passed down, and she was calling my mom different names in her head every time Mom tried to talk to her. And I ended up being right too. When she was throwing all her anger at me, she insulted my mom and called her a homewrecker. I know that it's not right to speak ill of the dead, but Dad's the one who left her. Mom did nothing wrong, she just fell in love. Dad's the one who left his young family for someone else, but somehow Mom's catching all the blame. It also seemed far from the way she was talking, that she felt like Dad abandoned her, and I can't speak on that, seeing as I wasn't even born until years after the whole court case thing was over. But I'd always heard from my mom that Dad tried his hardest to get custody of her. I don't know if her mom was lying to her or my mom was trying to make Dad seem like a better person, but there's clearly been some miscommunication here, and one of us is working on inaccurate information. So now I'm alone in my apartment feeling awful, intellectual. I don't think that I've done anything wrong. I really don't, but I do feel guilty. She just lost her dad, just like me, and I don't know her situation. And my little sister's kind of right. I've made no effort to get to know her. I don't know if she's married, has kids, or anything. Maybe she has a loan sharks busting down her doors every night. Maybe it's not even about the money. Then I feel like I'm being disloyal to Father for even considering her position. He spent his entire life missing her. His Christmas and birthday cards were always returned without the money in them. He would cry at least twice a year, missing her on holidays. Even on his last days, when he was practically delirious with pain medication, he called out her name just as much as he called out ours. He always felt like a part of him was missing, and I feel that I'm being disloyal by even considering her side of things. I'm also confused about why my little sister seems to be taking her side. I've always tried my best to be a good big sister. I've taken care of her, I've bailed her out of jail when she got a DUI, and I've given her money, more money than I can count without expecting anything back. So it feels like a betrayal that she would consider me in the wrong. I really didn't know what to do here. Obviously, it isn't about the money, and I don't care about the money. She can have her share if she wants, it doesn't bother me. It's just this feeling I get that she's been infiltrating our family in the hopes of getting some big payout. I don't know if I'm being unfair or what, but I could really use an outside perspective. Even if you've read through all of this and come to the conclusion that I'm wrong, that I'm selfish, a nasty person, I'd really appreciate your input. Because I'm at a loss here, and I'm just gonna say thanks in advance. I hope to hear from y'all soon. Update number 1. Hey guys, things seem to have gotten worse since the update. There's absolute war in the family, and everyone seems to think that it's my fault somehow. The only person who's on my side is my brother, and I have a sneaking suspicion that he doesn't actually care about any of this. He just wants to not have to give some of his money to our big sister. Even Mom thinks that I'm in the wrong, which is a curveball I didn't expect. Half of it's because I was so protective of her that I could not stand the idea of anyone talking badly about her behind her back. But now she's calling me selfish too, and it feels like everything's falling down around me. Honestly, after I wrote that last first update, I felt a little guilty. I thought that I was just being dramatic and that everything would be down soon, but I was wrong. I tried to call my little sister the next day just to talk to her and let her know that there's no hard feelings between us and that I'm not mad at her or anything. But she ignored my calls. I figured that she was just busy or something, so I sent her a text. Again, no response. So I figured that she was not on her phone, but then I saw that she was posting a lot on her Instagram story. So obviously she was just ignoring me for whatever reason. I start to get annoyed, but I try not to let the anger take over. I usually naturally assume the worst of people, but I didn't want to do that with my little sister, so I made a ton of excuses for her, like she was busy, my phone wasn't working, all kinds of crazy excuses that made no sense, but at least it made me feel a little bit better. I didn't want to believe that she was just screening my calls. Eventually, though, after a few days, I had to come back down to earth and be honest with myself. Yes, she was ignoring me. I didn't think that I've done anything to warrant this, and I still don't, but I was still trying to be understanding, so I wasn't mad or anything. Instead, I called my mom, who asked me if I wanted to have lunch with her. There was nothing weird or wrong with her tone, so I just thought she wants to spend some time together and agreed, but oh boy, I was wrong. When I arrived at the cafe, Mom was already sitting there waiting for me, and with one of those looks on her face, I could tell that she was mad. She's been pretty on edge since Dad died. I mean, yeah, understandable, so I thought that she was just in a bad mood or something, but as I sat down, she starts going in on me. I'll admit I zoned out a little and she was talking, but I got the gist of what she was saying well enough. It was pretty much the same as my little sister had said. I'm selfish. I've been rude to my big sister since we've met, and I've been trying to monopolize Dad's death and act like my grief is more important, and it just went on and on. At that point, though, I was starting to get annoyed. I just sat there and took it when my little sister was yelling at me. I didn't want to fight with her, especially after I just wasted all my mental energy yelling at our big sister. But with Mom, I was ready. I let her finish so that I would have time to work myself up to the argument. And by the time she was finished whisper yelling so that other people in the cafe would not hear her, I was more than ready. I'll admit that I did not deliver my point in the best way. I have a tendency of getting choked up and teary-eyed when I'm mad, but I think my mom understood what I was saying. Well, I pretty much said all the things that I've written down in the last update. How I think it's unfair for her to just show up and expect to be welcome into the family. How I felt uncomfortable whenever she mentioned my mother, knowing how my mother felt. How I felt bad for the dad who had missed her until his very last day. And how she hadn't even bothered to show up. Mom stayed quiet while I talked, thankfully, but she didn't seem to really hear what I was saying. She just brushed past everything I said and told me that I was being cold and greedy. As I've mentioned before, and as I told my mom right there, it isn't the money that bothers me. I genuinely don't care if she gets her share, it has nothing to do with me. It's the principle of the thing. None of us were sitting around waiting for Dad to die so that we could buy a flashy car or something, and none of us wanted him to die sooner so that we could have his money. But it seems like all she cares about. From the way she spoke, it seemed like she had basically infiltrated our little family in the sole hopes of getting a payout. And I felt like that was just an insult to Dad's memory. Honestly, I think that my meeting with my mom may have done more harm than good. Now, both she and my little sister think I'm cold, selfish person who would rather break apart the family than give up a little bit of money. I haven't spoken to either of them in a week now, and it feels like something's just twisting inside my stomach every time I think of them. I've tried to distract myself with work and stuff, but I always end up thinking about the situation again and wondering if I should feel guilty. I still don't think I'm in the wrong. I've come at it from every angle that I can, and I just cannot see a reality where I'm being selfish. None of this is about me. It's just me trying to protect and defend my family from an outsider trying to worm their way in for no good reason. I've spoken to my brother. He's on my side. He's called me the other day to talk about it, but as I said before, I think that he just wants to keep his money. The thing is, I don't even think he's being selfish, and that's the exact thing that Mom and my sister are accusing me of. He should not have to give up that much money just because someone thinks she deserves a cut. Of course, he isn't going to stand up to Mom and our sister for me. He's never been one for conflict, and I don't know, I think that he's just hoping that everything will work out. And that way, he won't have to give up anything or lift a finger. He's the typical younger child. I really have thought about this a lot. I've tried to see it from my big sister's side, but I just can't. Even with the excuse that their mom kept her away from her dad when she was young, she's been an adult for a long time now. She's had time to seek Dad out, to get the truth from him, and she did not even bother. She only showed up after he died, and I know I said before that she may not have known that he was sick, but honestly, if she had heard about the funeral, she must have heard about his cancer diagnosis. It's not like we were keeping it some big family secret or something. There was even a local fundraiser to pay for his medical bills. It was in the news, and there's absolutely no way she could have missed it. I'm just at a loss here. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I could pretend to accept her as a member of the family, give her the money and apologize, even though I don't think I'm wrong. But it just feels like such a betrayal to my dad's family. He doesn't deserve his legacy to be a couple of squabbles over money. It just feels like everyone's fighting over mundane things and a little money, when we should be thinking about how she treated Dad when he was alive. I know Dad would want me to accept her into the family. I'm struggling with knowing that he would not approve of what I was doing, but he was a pushover. He saw the best in people, but I'm realistic, and the idea of someone using my dad's death for their own gain just makes me, well, sick to my stomach. I know that I've said this before many times, but a lot of replies and comments on the original post are accusing me of only caring about the money, and I need to stress that's not true. I don't need the money, and even if 3 of us were to get together and split everything into quarters and give her a share, I would still have a lot left. I'm not trying to brag or anything, but Dad had a lot of money saved. It would put a dent in any of our pockets if we had to give a little away. On top of that, I have a good job. I get free healthcare, I get great benefits, and I don't need the money. It isn't about that. Not at all. This is about Dad and what he deserves and not disrespecting his memory. So let me know what you would do. Thanks, guys. I'll update whenever I find a way. Update number 2. I feel like such an idiot. All this time I've been defending my father like he was a saint, and I was wrong. I talked to my sister the other day, and according to our big sister, the whole story about Dad fighting for custody was a complete, utter lie. Also, the story we were always told that he waited until he was divorced to pursue my mom was a complete bullcrap lie also. According to our big sister, Dad cheated on his first wife with Mom for over a year before he ever filed for a divorce, and he didn't even bother fighting for custody. Apparently, he signed over his rights to his ex-wife, and she actually tried to get visitation for him, but he turned her down. Now, I took all this with a grain of salt, believe me. I wasn't about to believe whatever this woman had spewing from her mouth. Who knows what kind of lie she could have been concocting for her own gain? But then I asked my mom, who confirmed that it was true. I don't even know what to think. It feels like my head is in a blender or something. Everything I knew about my father, the way he loved his first daughter, the way he never forgot her, was all a lie. I don't know how to make sense of the truth versus what I knew my entire life. Obviously, I believe my mother. I don't think that she would lie about something so important to me like this, especially not at a crucial time like this, but it's so confusing. How am I supposed to believe that the man who cried over his first daughter all the time, who wrote her birthday and Christmas cards every year without fail, who called her out by her name while he was delirious on his deathbed, how am I supposed to believe that he was just a deadbeat father who lied to us? He was always an amazing father to me and my little siblings. He showed up to every dance recital and every soccer game, and he took my sister and me out on daddy-daughter dates every few months. He did everything he could to be a good father. How am I supposed to believe that while doing all this for us, he just completely abandoned his first family? It feels like everything's been in on some joke or something that's just going over my head, and they're all laughing at me behind their hands or something. I haven't talked to my mom or sister in a few days now. I don't exactly know what to say to them. Mom lied to us too, and I just don't think that I can look her in the eyes right now. My poor little sister has been dealing with all this stuff all alone. Feeling like she could not talk to me about it, I feel guilty too to face her, like I failed as a big sister, failed to protect her. I really don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Do I apologize to my big sister for getting everything wrong? Do I suddenly disown my dad or something post-mortem? None of my friends have lost a parent or even been in a situation. It's like I'm going at this blind. All these years, I've just been so defensive. Defensive of my parents' relationship, only to find out that Mother really is the homewrecker people have always been calling her. I'm just so lost right now. Update number 3, final update of the story. Hey everybody, I didn't mean to leave such a cliffhanger after the last update. Things kinda got a bit busy. First things first, my little siblings and I got together and we agreed that our big sister is entitled to 1/4 of Dad's money. It took me a while to come around to the idea, but after my idealized image of father was just, shattered, I was up for it. My little sister was the biggest champion of the whole thing, and my brother wasn't about to stick his neck out for anything. I apologized to my big sister. I think that she's still, pretty mad at me, but I've done pretty much all I can. Our little sister has been trying to get us to bond, but even after everything, I don't see it happening. I can tell that she still holds a little resentment towards me for everything, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't still question her motives for getting in touch. Just because I'm not still so defensive of Dad doesn't mean I don't think she did him dirty. He just did her more dirty. I haven't talked to Mom in a while. I'm still mad at her for all the lies growing up. Again, my little sister is pushing for us to talk, and Mom's been calling recently, but I just don't want to speak to her, to be honest. I usually think of myself as a forgiving person, but I just can't bring myself to forgive and forget the fact that she lied to me for, over 2 decades. It's not like I would have hated her. Kids always think their parents are right. I could have been told, she killed someone, and I would have grown up defending her. Mom and Dad were just too guilty to admit to their own kids what they've done. And that's what I'm mad about. Well, guys, this is probably the last update you'll hear from me on this. I don't see anything changing anytime soon. I still have a lot to puzzle out in my head. Thanks for the support and all the updates and your advice. Have a great day.
So, I was starting to feel very bad for OP. Everybody in her life was lying to her. Her father, her mother, everyone. So I do have to ask you guys this. Do you think OP made the right decision with her other siblings in order to split this inheritance money with her older sister, who was never really around much? Or do you think that OP's feelings were right, to be a little bit resentful about the whole situation? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, guys. Today's story was an interesting one. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe for daily videos. Guys, have a fantastic day. Drop your thoughts below, and I will see you in the next one.